Rwanda is increasingly recognized as a leader in migration governance and regional integration. What lessons from Rwanda's experience could benefit other countries across Africa?
Rwanda brings a very welcoming approach to the issue of migration, recognizing that people have moved for centuries and that the best way to approach the issue is one where you enable people to find access to jobs, access to housing, to better integrate into communities, to have proper identification so that they are not working or living in the shadows. That's a best practice that all countries should consider.
Now, youth employment remains a priority across the continent. How can labor mobility and skills partnerships help create opportunities for young Africans while supporting economic growth?
The demographic shifts around the world are profoundly affecting job opportunities. Right now, across many parts of the world, in North America, for example, in Europe, in the Gulf states, in parts of Asia, there simply are not enough young people who can take the jobs that are available. And so many of those countries are looking for people who have ambition, who want opportunity, and to enable them to come and work in their countries. Now, that's good news for much of Africa, because in Africa, we have a wide group of young people, many of whom don't have the opportunities here that they may have elsewhere. So going abroad, getting the skills, learning new languages, building the resources they need, including financial resources, and bringing those back into the countries where people are from actually will help enable development.
Okay, Rwanda has one of Africa's most engaged diasporas. What role can diaspora communities play in driving investment, innovation, and development back home?
I've seen some really good examples of it here already in Rwanda, including, for example, a young man I met yesterday who is building a device to measure the emissions from vehicles and to track when those vehicles are emitting more than what are permissible emissions. Now, that young man, a couple years ago, he was a student here in Rwanda. Through diaspora mentoring, he has received the kind of advice he needs to build this into a business. Today, he's hired people, he's expanding his business. He's now expanded the concept to have farming equipment that can ship from the farm directly into communities, things that were not really attainable before. And it's that diaspora engagement that's helped him to achieve those goals.
Now, on a broader perspective, as the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area advances, what role does human mobility play in unlocking the continent's economic potential?
It's incredibly important for people to be able to move where the opportunities are. That requires some level of free movement. That doesn't mean that there's no controls, no management of that movement. And so governments like Rwanda are taking very seriously how to manage their borders, establishing one-stop border posts, for example, that help facilitate trade, but also help address any kinds of threats that they may be worried about. So thinking about it comprehensively, what are the ways we can enable the movement of people, the movement of goods, but also manage the risks that countries may perceive?
The reality is that migration is often discussed in terms of just challenges. So where are some of the opportunities that well-managed migration can create for countries like Rwanda?
Well, the evidence shows us overwhelmingly that migration, when it's well managed, actually leads to greater economic prosperity for the country the migrant comes from and the country the migrant goes to. So what Rwanda is doing at this moment, first and foremost, to invite investment into its country where young people then can get the skills and the experiences that they need, is one good way. Another, though, is to look for opportunities for young people to go abroad, to live, to work, and then to bring back their funds and their resources into the country. Now, this is the way we can exchange new ideas, new innovations, and actually advance economies in both countries. So there's a lot that can happen when you manage migration and you have people able to travel in a safe and regular channel. When people are traveling through smuggling networks, that's where the exploitation and abuse happens. So thinking about countering smuggling and trafficking by enabling safe and regular pathways for movements is a winning strategy.
Looking ahead, what trends do you see shaping migration in Africa over the next decade, and how should governments prepare?
Well, there are two different trends, and they're going to be on different sides of the spectrum. The first are the trends that we're seeing that are causing people to move. And increasingly, the impact of a changing climate, drought, floods, land degradation, sea level rise, those are increasingly causing people to move, and more people are moving today as a result of those kinds of pressures than any other pressure. Likewise, the impact of conflict. When there's no peace, people move in search of safety, in search of protection. So that's on the push side. On the other side are the opportunities that exist. The fact that we have so many young people here in this continent, the fact that there are not enough young people in other parts of the world. So that will create a competition for talent. And young Rwandans who have the skills they need, they'll be very competitive in that labor market competition.
Well, speaking of conflict, Rwanda has welcomed refugees and asylum seekers from the region for many years now. What role can countries such as Rwanda play in shaping more sustainable approaches to refugee protection and addressing regional displacement?
It's important to look at the issue of migration regionally, not just country by country, because by its nature, migration means people are moving across borders from one country to the next. So bringing a regional approach to issues like protection, to issues like access to education, access to the job market, integration into communities, that's critical. And what I've seen here in Rwanda that is so promising is many, many different parts of the government looking at this issue from every different angle. So I've met with the Minister of Trade, I've met with the Minister of Labor, I've met with the Minister of Home Affairs. Every single one is looking at a dimension on the issue of the movement of people to come up with this comprehensive strategy. Now that's the right way to do it. It's not something we see in every part of the world. It's something that we'd recommend to other countries.
Now, maybe expanding on that, we know that many young Africans see migration as a pathway to better economic opportunities. How can governments and international organizations expand safe and regular pathways for young people while reducing the risks associated with irregular migration, of course, touching on the whole business of smuggling and so on?
So one way is, again, to look at the whole route that people are now traveling and to understand from the evidence, from the data, why is someone moving in the first instance? What happens when they're moving along that journey and where are they going? Once you understand those dynamics and then you can take them apart, you can address each part of it to better protect people and better offer them opportunities. Now, one thing we see that's very, very worrisome is a number of East Africans have been recruited to work in scam centers in parts of Asia, Myanmar, Cambodia, for example. And those young people think they're going for a real job. When they get there, though, they're being exploited, they're being abused, their passports are taken, they're not doing the work they thought they would do. Now, we advise all young people, when you see these job opportunities, make sure that there are proper visas that are being offered, make sure there are proper protections. Don't just jump on every opportunity as it opens up. So the more that governments, for example, Rwanda, can partner with other governments to establish these safe mobility channels, to ensure that recruitment agencies are registering, and to hold them accountable, to make sure that young people, especially when they go abroad, are not being exploited, are being paid what they said they were going to be paid. That's the way we can make sure that this will work.
Is there anything else you'd like to tell our viewers before we conclude this interview?
Well, the world is changing rapidly, and the countries that are going to get ahead the fastest are those who recognize that change, who build systems to take advantage of those changes, who recognize that migration is part of human development. That's what we see here in Rwanda. That's the exciting thing about working with the government of Rwanda. And countries all around the world should be taking a look at what Rwanda is doing, because we believe this will help advance the economy faster.
Amy Pope, Director General of the International Organization for Migration, thank you for taking the time to speak to Rwanda Television.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.